We've been focused a lot on what's going on in Los Angeles over the course of this week, but back in Washington, the Secretary of Defense has been on Capitol Hill and kind of refusing, in a number of cases, refusing to answer questions that seem pretty straightforward and pretty legitimate, like talking about what the plans are and the budget's going to be for this retrofitting of the new Qatari Air Force One. Yesterday, he refused to answer a question from one of your colleagues, Rokana, about whether he would abide by federal court rulings that were laid down. I'm curious about what you think of how you evaluate on the whole here, also his willingness immediately to dispatch those 700 Marines to L.A. I'm curious what you think of how Secretary Hegseth is doing at this point, and whether we're starting to see some of the things that people worried about with his confirmation.
Well, of course we are, right? I mean, look, we could have a partisan bickering match about this, but serious people know that Pete Hegseth is way, way out of his depth, right? We saw this with the Signal chat. We saw it. We see it over and over and over again. And at the time of the Signal chat scandal, for example, when he was posting, in advance of strikes, precisely the weapon systems being used to undertake strikes against the Houthi, what I thought to myself, well, let's just hope that we don't have an international conflict that actually requires Pete Hegseth to provide advice, to provide wisdom, to provide judgment. And here we are with a war ongoing in the Middle East. So his behavior is perfectly predictable, right? If you work for Donald Trump, you are not a cabinet secretary, you are an acolyte. And you do exactly what Donald Trump wants you to do. And Donald Trump wants that Qatari jet. He wants the option to deploy the Marines throughout the United States. If you read that order that he issued, he can deploy military force, not just in Los Angeles. And it is not going to be Pete Hegseth who says, yeah, I'm not quite sure I agree with the president on that point. So not at all surprising that he couldn't even say, you didn't mention, but he couldn't even tell Mike Turner, my former chairman of the intelligence, he couldn't even tell Mike Turner that the Pentagon didn't have plans to attack Greenland because, of course, he can't.
Yeah, and certainly there have been a lot of questions raised about that, Greenland and Panama, from that hearing the other day. Ranking member of the House
New this morning, President Trump is celebrating a federal appeals court decision that temporarily put a pause on a lower court's order requiring that he give back control of California's National Guards to the state. The president writing on social media in part, quote, "Thank you for the decision." Another hearing is set for Tuesday, and this all stems over, well, what you see on your screen right there, from Trump's decision to federalize National Guard troops and send them in to respond to the L.A. protests over his immigration raids. CNN's Harry Anton running the numbers on this one for you this morning. So overall, how have what we've seen in the last days, but also the last few weeks, of ramped up immigration crackdowns, these raids that we've seen in California and beyond, and the protests in response? How's it impacting his approval?
Yeah, I think the simple word here is hurt. It has hurt Donald Trump's popularity. You can see it right here. We have two new polls, Quinnipiac University, AP Newark. I got the prior poll for you on the screen. I got the now. This is the net approval rating. You can see this in Quinnipiac, -12 to -16. How about AP Newark? -16 to -21. Awful, awful, awful for both of these pollsters. Where we are right now, both Quinnipiac and AP Newark, the worst for Donald Trump in this term so far. He is very much way, way, way underwater, at least in these two polls.
And this is overall approval. How about specifically on immigration?
Yeah, so immigration has been a strength for Donald Trump. That was why in the beginning of the week I said that Donald Trump wanted this fight. Maybe he shouldn't have wanted this fight. What are we talking about here? Let's take a look at the net approval rating for Donald Trump on immigration. You go back to June 1, he was at +4 points. Look at where he is now, -2 points in the aggregate. That is a drop of 6 points in only about 2 weeks' time. The only thing that's happened over the last 2 weeks is obviously Donald Trump's ramped up immigration hawkish agenda. And at least at this particular point, the American people are saying, no, we do not like that. And they have turned against the president on his core strength issue of immigration. He is now underwater on the issue that has been strongest for him.
A bit of a turn, but it is happening this weekend. This weekend is the big military parade that the president, we know, has been pushing for and is getting this time to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. There's been a lot of back and forth about concerns over cost and simply how much the hardware and military tanks are going to weigh, and could they damage even the roads. But still, it's moving ahead. But how are people feeling about it?
Yeah, you know, if immigration has not helped Donald Trump, maybe he wants to change the subject to this military parade. But take a look here. Government funds for the military parade. A good use of funds? Only 38% say yes, it is a good use of funds. How about not a good use? 60% say not a good use of funds. And get this, in the center of the electorate among independents, just 24% of independents say it is a good use of funds. This has simply been one of the worst polling weeks for Donald Trump that we've seen. You really only saw worse numbers around his 100th day. But at this particular point, Donald Trump is much more towards the trough of his popularity than the crest of it.
We bill hospitals will close, nursing homes will shut down, community-based health clinics are not going to be able to operate. People are going to die because of the lack of being able to receive the medical service that they need. And so Trump is certainly trying to hide the ball from the American people, but this is a disgusting abomination. And the more the American people learn about the GOP tax scam, the worse it gets for them.
Senator Alex Padilla obviously became the news of the day in Washington when that video spread of him being attacked like that in a federal building, a completely secure federal building that you have to go through metal detectors and have an appointment to get into. Here's a United States senator in a federal building being attacked by federal agents with a cabinet secretary looking on, lying about California while that was happening. Where were you when you first saw that video, and what was your reaction, maybe holding your phone in your hand looking at that video?
It was disgusting when the news broke. I was on the Hill. We were preparing for a series of votes on the floor of the House. And when you looked at the video, first of all, to know Senator Padilla, he is just a kind and decent person, a salt of the earth type of individual. He has an extraordinary story, humble beginnings, eventually became an engineer, MIT educated, and then walked away from what could have been a very lucrative career in order to serve his community and ultimately his state. And to see him assaulted in this fashion, manhandled, and then for the secretary to lie about it and the Department of Homeland Security, these people have zero credibility. And so the California delegation, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, every single part of the House Democratic Caucus stands in solidarity with Senator Padilla. If they can attack a sitting senator in his home state in this fashion, just imagine what they have in store for the American people. That's why all of us should be concerned. All of us need to push back. And all of us need to stand up for the principle that in the United States of America, there are no kings.
Senator Padilla has insisted that this story is not about him. It's what it means to the rest of us. It's what it means about the people who the ICE agents and the federal agents are going after every day. Let's listen to what Senator Padilla said when he came out of that federal building after becoming the first United States senator in history to be manhandled, pushed by federal agents, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed for speaking. That has never happened before in American history. Let's listen to what Senator Padilla said when he emerged from the federal building today.
I came to the press conference to hear what she had to say, to see if I could learn any new additional information. And at one point, I had a question. And let me emphasize, just as we've emphasized the right for people to peacefully protest and to stand up for their First Amendment rights, for our fundamental rights. I was there peacefully. At one point, I had a question. And so I began to ask a question. I was almost immediately forcibly removed from the room. I was forced to the ground, and I was handcuffed. I was not arrested. I was not detained. I will say this. If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, if this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California and throughout the country. Pero una gran pregunta es esta. Si esta es la reacción a un senador con una pregunta. Imagínense lo que están haciendo con cocineros, jornaleros, campesinos y otros inmigrantes no violentos en la comunidad de Los Ángeles, en otras áreas del estado de California y en el país.
Leader Jeffries, that statement about just imagine what they're doing to other people if this is what they do to United States senators does seem to be the lesson of the day.
It's incredibly powerful words from Senator Padilla. I think it's one of the reasons why there was such a visceral reaction on the Hill, both because we know him to be such a good man, and this is just an example of how out of control the Trump administration is at this point. We've seen an unprecedented assault on the economy, on health care, on Social Security, and of course on the rule of law, on the American way of life, on democracy itself. But that's why it's going to be important for all of us to continue to show up and speak up and stand up, push back aggressively against the Trump administration, their extremism against Donald Trump and his minions in Congress who are nothing more than a reckless rubber stamp for his extreme agenda. And we'll continue to do that in the Congress, in the courts, and in communities all across the country.
An awful day for Trump. His cabinet is falling apart. They're making fools of him. I'm sure some of them are not happy with him for all the chaos. This is the life. This is their life now. This is what you signed up for, Trump cabinet. This is what you signed up for, to work for the dangerous idiot, to work for the fool, the man who puts himself ahead of the country, the man who will sell each and every one of you for, well, not even for anything. Like, of course he'll sell you for a dime, but he'll get rid of you for no reason than he wants to. That it'd be funny, or there's a scandal today and he'll get rid of you, and then you could have been his Secretary of Defense, his Secretary of Homeland Security, his Secretary of State, his Attorney General. It doesn't matter. You'll be that guy or gal. Yeah, maybe you got him coffee a couple times. Like that. That's what you'll be reduced to. And at best, MAGA will forget you exist, and at worst, they will hate you like Mike Pence years later for the one time that you maybe didn't even do something wrong. This is your life. Trump's collapsing. And of course, he's definitely going to blame his cabinet. 100%. His cabinet's going to blame him. I frankly think his cabinet has more reason to blame him than the other way around. Although it is a clown car. It's a clown circus. But, he's collapsing. And it's important to note this. That Trump is falling in the areas that he used to be strong in. And I think his cabinet people are going to be mad at him and vice versa. For example, Trump, say what you will, was strong on immigration. People trusted him on immigration. I don't know why. They did, though. More than the Democrats. Right? On the economy, he was stronger, too. On trade, he was stronger because he was the businessman, the deal maker. Now, him and his cabinet have, in just a few weeks, destroyed everything.